Next door to the skeleton realm is the realm of the goblins. For the most part, these two realms live in peace. However, the skeletons are jealous of the goblins' ability to wear Raycon's everyday earbuds. Goblins love how the everyday earbuds don't fall out of their ears no matter how much they sneak about. This is thanks to the optimized gel tips which give the perfect in-ear fit. The sweat and water resistance is also a huge selling point for any goblin. They love the 3 different sound profiles to choose from, including pure and balanced modes. But their favorite is the bass sound profile, so that they can listen to all their goblin tunes. With 8 hours of continuous playtime too, 32 hours overall with the case. All they did was head over to buyraycon.com/LIMC and slash the unbelievable price of Raycon's everyday earbuds by 15%. With the premium look and feel and over 50,000 5-star reviews, of course the skeletons would be jealous, but you don't have to be. Raycon have sponsored this video and are offering 15% off your Raycon purchase. Go to buyraycon.com/LIMC, link in the description. Alright, ad time over, let's start. The internet itself is a place of horror. As such, despite all the amazing and positive facets of this incredible digital world, the internet can be likened to a petri dish full of every single disease known to man, and people tend to dive into it on the daily. Some of this horror can be participated in relatively harmlessly, however, and this often takes place in the form of horror memes. From the stupidest creepypasta to the terrifying stories emanating from the backrooms, horror has well and truly situated itself as the perfect genre from which shitposting can thrive, ensuring its place within digital folklore. A paper was released explaining how the SCP Foundation plays a significant role in the development of academic literacy and the promotion of reading and creative writing, which is absolutely incredible. Clearly, there's more than meets the eye here when it comes to ridiculous urban legends and their ability to entertain us. Clearly, horror has the ability to not only draw attention, but also improve humanity. The main difference between traditional horror and horror memes is, of course, that one can build on and take part in a story. It isn't as if you're passively watching a movie in which a slasher is going around killing everything. In this instance, the audience is able to participate directly through the nature of the medium, allowing others to take what is created and also make it bigger and more accessible, leading to a snowball in stories and pockets of lore all incessantly iterated on by passionate artists. So let's take a look at a few of the most important horror movements throughout internet culture and discern why horror memes are so popular. Many memes express the moment their creator was traumatized as a child by being given unfettered internet access and immediately stumbling upon a beheading video, but the internet can go further than that in ruining people's lives. From the earliest chain emails depicting some sort of scam to the very real issues people face today with doxing, stalking, and ultimately violence, the internet can be a scary place despite many associating it with a good time. This dystopic view on the World Wide Web is framed by many things, including an awareness that many of the freedoms allowed by internet culture are a double-edged sword, as one can be having insane levels of fun 1 minute and then be absolutely depressed the next, depending on what content one encounters. The compatibility of memes in terms of their ability to transcend the media they originate in also applies to material found online. Whether this be an image leaked online breaching someone's privacy, or even the horrific A Serbian film finding its ways into the eyes of a child as they search for edgy content, the internet can very easily become a place of horror itself despite the incredible wealth of information it offers. Not only does the world find itself on the receiving end on the best of humanity, but also the worst it has to offer. That being said, at times this wealth of information can spin into interesting databases. All kinds of well-written stories can be fabricated by those fascinated by the macabre or supernatural, and in doing so the world is being given an incredible resource in the form of creepypasta. Whilst the origins of the first creepypasta seems to be difficult to pin down, many agree the genre was popularized around 2001 with a story called Ted the Caver. This story was initially hosted on a website called Angelfire, through which users could read a half-journal, half-reflective blog detailing Ted's exploits in a spooky cave, which is still available to peruse should one wish to do so. For many, this would be taken as fact rather than fiction. In the early 2000s, it was almost impossible to discern whether this was a fake or real story, but it certainly piqued the interest of many to the point where it was shared around online. This is why it's led many to believe Ted the Caver is the first ever creepypasta. Then, the rake became the next thing circa 2005, as it began with the infamous line, "Hey B, let's make a new monster," demonstrating the participatory aspects of online horror and the ability of anyone to create something disgustingly popular. Then, creepypasta.com would be introduced to the scene in 2008, parallel to some of the biggest stories like Jeff the Killer, ultimately existing as a database for all to peruse in order to get a decent creepypasta fix. It would become so popular that many still use it today, over 10 years after its introduction. Then Slender Man arrived in 2009, created by artist Eric Knudsen in a Photoshop thread on something awful, which transcended to amateur stories in the form of creepypasta. This led to real-world stabbings and a subsequent boom in mainstream interest regarding creepypasta, revealing some of the powerful links between online creations and real-world consequences. And the Russian sleep experiment of 2009 was also huge, with the image most commonly attributed to it coming from a picture of a Halloween decoration called Spasm. As the creepypasta community continues to grow, so too does the world's interest in amateur stories that can fascinate the most skeptical of the supernatural. This is also because they are often shared in more than just text format. Many accounts on social media dedicate their time to visual presentations in the form of film or even animation in regards to spreading awareness about each piece of digital folklore. This awareness regarding digital folklore brings us to the next chapter, the concept of the SCP Foundation. The SCP Foundation is a remarkable piece of work spanning over a decade. The acronym stands for Secure, Contain, Protect, and refers to a shadowy organization that categorizes supernatural entities. It was conceived in 2007 on a 4chan post, in which a user utilized a clinical tone in order to detail an entity called SCP-173, otherwise known as the Statue, which would exploit a creation by Japanese artist Izumi Kato titled Untitled 2004. The statue is perhaps one of the most famous entities to stem from the absolutely enormous library detailing thousands of creations over the years, many of which have inspired films and other forms of media. This would culminate in one of the largest collaborative projects online today, with an undeniable cultural impact reaching through the bounds of the internet and out into the offline world. Fascinatingly, so prominent has this directory become that it is featured in academic research many times over, to the point where a 2021 study determined its use in regards to the development of academic literacy and the promotion of reading and creative writing. This is because, unlike general contributions to the horror genre online, the SCP Foundation encourages recreational use of a certain literary style, ensuring many of the articles existing within it remain consistent and canon even when referencing other pieces. It's enthralling to think that not only is horror improving the quality of life for many here in terms of increasing day-to-day enjoyment, but also literally improving the world as a form of education in regards to literacy rates. This brings us to the next major pillar of horror in the meme community, that of the cursed image. Cursed images can generally be described as images with an unsettling nature, at times reminiscent of liminal spaces and usually weird enough that they require several viewings in order to understand what is happening. It's widely accepted that the first account to archive cursed images began on Tumblr, with a post in 2015 that generates this entirely unsettling feeling without being overly aggressive. See, that's the thing about this genre, they don't need to be terrifying to evoke a feeling of horror, and sometimes the subtle composition of each image is enough to creep out any person staring at it for long enough. In an interview with Artland magazine, the original owner of the blog said there were certain criteria to look for when it came to finding a cursed image. Some of these forgotten photographs just had an eerie mood about them, like someone had captured a moment from a dream or another life. I was particularly interested in finding photos of dark and empty rooms, mannequins and costumes, all of which became common themes among cursed images. It's these amateur aspects, these feelings of realness and authenticity, that distinguish cursed images from regular photoshopped horror fodder. For example, a picture of Slender Man may be described as cursed, but it wouldn't normally be defined as a cursed image, due to the fact that it is heavily edited and clearly so. Each image becomes an art piece in its own right, devoid of context and clearly delving far into the uncanny valley. That isn't to say the concept of a cursed image is new, as there have been many artists and photographers in the past utilizing the banal menace of mundane images, but for this genre to be celebrated so widely is certainly novel and worth talking about. Speaking of the uncanny valley and liminal spaces, this brings us perhaps to the largest modern example of a cursed image going absolutely huge online, that of the backrooms. The backrooms are perhaps one of the most famous pieces of horror media conceived on the internet. The premise of an office space that stretches on forever, lit with fluorescent light tubes emitting a constant buzzing and no discernible way in or out, is enough horror to pique the interest of many, especially when related to video game horror in the sense that you no-clip into it and can't get out. It all seems to have begun thanks to a post on 4chan in 2018, with the introduction of creepypasta and memes surrounding the drab yellow rooms soon following the original static image. Countless videos, text, and all kinds of media are being constructed to reference it, and as such the world has seen many iterations and interpretations of the liminal space built over the years. It could be argued the Backrooms is responsible for the explosion in interest regarding liminal spaces, as it remains a perfect example of somewhere that one can exist in, yet it feels transitory, as if one can never quite know exactly what is around the corner. Its consistent popularity as a place of horror that continues to be expanded upon indefinitely, in quite the same manner as the environment in which it persists, certainly allows it to be identified as one of the most important collaborative horror pieces to grace the internet today. This brings us to an interesting transformation in terms of content, that of the trollface to trollge. Witnessing one of the internet's most famous memes, the troll face, transform into something dark and depraved has got to be one of the best analogies for the initially utopic hope many had about the internet in the early 2000s, and its fall to becoming one of the biggest cesspits for fighting and disinformation in the world. With the troll face starting in 2008 as a mainstay of rage comics, it quickly became one of the biggest memes of the 2000s and early 2010s. It would die off in popularity throughout the mid-2010s, but stayed relevant in many minor communities, always lurking at the shadows of internet culture until the end of the decade. In 2020, the trollface became subject to horrific distortions, which would start with the cover yourself in oil comic that quickly mutated into insane stories. Over time, artists would run with this narrative of the trollface becoming monstrous, and in doing so parodied its original meaning whilst increasing its artistic relevance to the modern era. The world would soon see the once beloved icon become trolled, an unknowable entity that soon became popular through the medium of incidents. Stories surrounding these incidents would continue for years, remaining popular well into 2022 and racking up millions of views. That being said, the origins of the trollface were quite monstrous initially, considering it's based on a creature called the rape rodent. If anything, this popularity demonstrates the interest surrounding the transformation of familiar memes into something terrifying, and in doing so exhibits the importance of Trollface's mutation to trolled in regards to meme culture and its relation to horror. When researching the reasons why people are attracted to horror media, it becomes astoundingly clear that many are simply looking for a piece of safe stimulation. In that sense, being able to experience an adrenaline rush only available from looking at something scary, and then staying sound in the knowledge that one is doing so from behind a screen, can be a great way for people to enjoy the internet. Perusing content that elicits extreme emotions can be a healthy pastime in order to explore one's own interests, and in doing so the darker side of humanity can be deconstructed through the format of meme culture. Of course, the emphasis remains on the word healthy here. Looking for literal extremist content in order to get an adrenaline fix is not a good way to go, and is certainly not what this channel recommends doing. Instead, it's worth noting the appeal of horror remains in its ability to challenge a viewer. Perhaps one can observe an unfamiliar aspect of life in the form of the supernatural or the chillingly banal. At any rate, the psychology surrounding the fascination humans possess regarding horrific content is extremely interesting, as one would assume we'd be uninterested in things that scare us. However, the facts remain that horror memes are one of the most popular forms of content on the internet, and in doing so persist in quickly becoming an insanely large area of academic research. It's worth reiterating the fact that the internet is a scary place. Even without constructed horror media, the people that inhabit the internet can be dangerous enough to strike fear in the hearts of any regular person. However, that doesn't mean humanity should turn away from it. In fact, there are ways to educate oneself in the pitfalls and traps surrounding the internet's many downfalls and thrive in the chaotic environment instead. There are so many incredible creations utilizing the genre of horror to demonstrate wild imagination for the betterment of humankind, to the point where they can improve one's own intelligence. From long creepypasta stories, to clinical articles in the SCP Foundation, to the banal surrealism of the cursed images, to the unsettling liminal backrooms, to the fascinating transformation of the trollface to trolled, to many, many more examples in the ever-shifting digital landscape, meme culture and horror are proving extremely compatible, demonstrating the psychology of why we love participating in constructing things that terrify us, and why these collaborative projects are recognized as not only entertainment, but as artistic works truly deserving of academic research. On that note, I'd just like to say thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Join the spooky skeletons and goblins to get 15% off with the link in the description. What meme would you guys like me to give a lesson in next? Let me know in the comments below.
And remember, like and subscribe! Or else.